Well, Tim, I appreciate you taking the time to catch up with me here at MWC Las Vegas. You chaired a really well-attended summit earlier today on satellite and NTN. Maybe set the scene for us a little bit. You presented a lot of GSMAi Intelligence's research findings there at the beginning. What would you pull out for our audience?
Well, I think this story of the telco satellite convergence continues to run. It continues to scale. This event we did here, we've done around the world, and I think every time we see more interest because of the depth of collaboration. So, point one, 70% of global market share in the telco sector has a satellite partnership. So it's not a regional niche, it's a global phenomenon. Point two, we are starting to see services deployed commercially. Starlink is leading that picture with a number of partnerships. We talked about T-Mobile, Rogers, Intel, and others. And I think that leads to this dimension of commercialization. We're starting to see that. How much does it happen? People in our surveys say they'll pay about 10% more per month for satellite. The market's suggesting 15 to 20% right now. How does that play out? We're really interested to find out. And the last dimension, spectrum. The EchoStar transaction with Starlink, the $17 billion, probably the single biggest topic today of discussion in terms of how that maybe reshapes the competitive landscape, where that goes. For us, it points to the growing value of MSS spectrum. Starlink and AST are both doing the same things in different ways. But ultimately, I think it poses questions for the rest of the industry about how they compete against that model, and of course brings in the question of longer term consolidation.
Yeah, let's talk more about consolidation. Starlink has a huge constellation compared to everybody else playing in the space. Yep. Satcom, very capital intensive. It's not unlike RAN, right? I mean, it's a scale business.
Yep.
What do you think is going to happen in the next 2 or 3 years as the standards mature, as the services mature, and the whole business viability plays out?
So I think it comes down to two things. One, you can't compare Starlink like for like with everybody else because they're bankrolled by the richest person in the world. So they have different financing availability completely. Some of the panelists today talked about desired CapEx holidays because it costs a lot of money to build constellations and launch them, of course. But I think what it's going to come down to is whether you can see common standards that drive the cost of equipment down for the satellite systems that are needed to propel this technology, or whether you move more in a proprietary route. One of the big questions for us coming out of the EchoStar deal with Starlink, that spectrum doesn't work on handsets very well right now. So Elon Musk has got to go to OEMs and try to get their frequencies catered to what he's bought, right? It's not clear if the OEMs are going to play ball with that or whether they want to harmonize against MSS, which has a lot more global scale. So this question of proprietary versus harmonized, it's not completely mutually exclusive, but that's going to be a big influencing factor that determines the pace of consolidation and the extent of it with the rest of the value chain.
And I know there's a lot of emphasis right now on consumer-facing services, emergency messaging, text messaging, voice in some cases. Yep. I'm a little more interested in IoT for things like energy, agriculture, etc. Give me a little bit of a sense of the relationship between volume share and value share in that space.
Good question. So, in terms of volume, we think there's about 3, maybe 3.5 billion IoT devices in range for satellite. And that's out of a total universe of probably about 35 billion right now. So call it 10, 15%. That number will grow. The volume share is still dominated by cars and energy and utilities. So think about weather monitors, sensory systems. The value share, though, tilts a little bit different. Automotive is number one, but then you get into applications with precision agriculture, oil and gas that are much higher value than the energy and utilities. So you see a bit of an inversion between the volume and the value. I think the question for IoT perspective is, and we saw a lot of this in the event today, how much of a premium can those ARPUs command over time? And can a satellite ARPU be a premium to a cellular IoT ARPU? Remains to be seen.
Just a follow-up on that, if we think about these IoT use cases, a lot of them are global in nature.
Yep.
Just to pick one like asset tracking or
Yeah.
logistics, is there any kind of considerations around global governance models and frameworks where those need to be aligned for an operator that's country-based to offer a service that is global?
So I think the biggest example of that comes in terms of roaming provisions, which have still got to be worked out. We do see a number of other regulatory categories that will be different between different countries, and also different between the requirements of a satellite operator compared to a mobile operator, cellular operator. These are very important details that are going to have to be worked through. In terms of scale of the actual systems, though, I think it's the cross-border roaming that needs to get solved first, and that comes down to being able to integrate the terrestrial signal with the non-terrestrial signal.
So if you get out your crystal ball and think ahead to 2026, what are you going to be presenting on stage at the summit next year?
That's the $64,000 question. I think we're going to be talking about the validation of the commercial deployments we've seen. Are they pricing at a premium? What is the take-up from the actual user base and actual mobile operators? I think that's one dimension, sort of just reality check on the hype. I think two, we're going to be looking at whether there are more spectrum plays, particularly in the MSS dimension, and three, potentially consolidation. I think, and I say three because that really depends on one and two. I think there's this often question about how many constellations can the world support. There's no one right answer for that. It ultimately depends on how much demand materializes. And so that will come down to the pricing models and the service availability. But John, to be honest, this is not just a 12-month story. This is probably a 4 or 5 year story. So I think it needs to take time to play out, and we're excited to watch it.
Well, Tim, I really appreciate you taking the time to share with our audience your research and your perspective.
Thanks very much.